Soundsphere is an open-source vertical scrolling rhythm game created by
Simeon.
422. If you've been in the 10K plus server, you might have seen this word pop up in discussions about converting key counts. But yes, it's its own rhythm game and not just a standalone tool for converting maps. It supports many different chart formats, including Osu, Stepmania, Quaver, BMS, and has a plethora of chart modification options that makes it a superior client to practice in. Once you've installed the game, you're greeted with this screen, which looks pretty empty and confusing, and you have no songs. Let's focus on the 3 buttons at the bottom right. The Direct button gives you access to Osu Direct, and we're able to search and download maps here. Now, there might be an issue with being rate limited, or something to do with the Osu API, but you wouldn't want to re-download your entire Osu library anyway, so I wouldn't use this feature too much. Once you do download a map, you can click the Notes chart button to go back to the main screen, and the newly downloaded map should appear. Clicking the Collections button subdivides all the charts into the respective folders. This is useful if you know the specific game or pack the chart comes from. The top option lists everything available to Soundsphere. Clicking the Pause button pauses the current song playing. To add previously downloaded maps into Soundsphere, it's as easy as dragging the entire song folder into the game's window and then restarting the game. You will have to click this button so that the cache of each song gets updated in-game. Once that finishes, you can browse all the songs at once or browse specific song packs, like you would in Eterna. This basically mounts the file location into the game, so you're able to load and play them. At no point should you actually be copying or pasting anything into Soundsphere's folders or anything like that, especially when it comes to Osu maps. Here's what my game looks like. Remember to periodically update your chart listings whenever you've added a lot of new maps to your Osu or Eterna install. Soundsphere has its own skinning format, which opens up a lot of doors in terms of customization and layouts for different key counts. Now that's a little bit too advanced for the average user, and you're probably more interested in using your Osu skin, so we'll focus on that for this video, and save all of the advanced customizations for another video. For this, you'll have to copy over your skins folder into the skin folder in Soundsphere, reload your game, and it should display here and work as intended, as long as the key count of the current chart is supported within your skin. Otherwise, the default values will be used. Setting keybinds works like this too, so make sure you're under the intended key count before switching your skin or keybinds. You do have the option to modify some aspects of the skin config, but I would still do this in a text editor just so I know exactly what I'm changing. Soundsphere can be a bit finicky with the errors, so be careful about what you're modifying, as one small error can lead to the game not loading. Soundsphere makes a distinction between key lanes and scratch lanes. This allows for an even deeper customization when it comes to skinning and chart modifications. But because of this, all Osu maps, regardless of whatever N+1 setting is enabled, is considered keys. This is further reflected on the website's leaderboards. So if you do want to participate in these leaderboards, you will have to play a BMS chart, which does have the scratch lane distinction. As such, none of your Osu skins will work with these charts, as they don't have the dedicated scratch lanes, unless you use a no scratch mod. This leads to some weird implications. For example, if alternate doubles the input and we set that to apply to the scratch lanes, well, 0 times 2 is still 0. So as far as I know, there is no automatic way of introducing scratch lanes into the chart, but you can remove them, double them, or even convert the key counts independently from the scratch lanes. A lot of flexibility to be had here. Speaking of mods, let's briefly go over the mod table. Soundsphere mods are divided into 2 categories, single-use modifiers and sequential modifiers. The single-use modifiers are pretty straightforward, so don't worry about them too much. For the sequential modifiers, the order in which you select the mods make a big difference as to how the chart is generated. For example, just switching the order of these 2 mods gives completely different key counts and patterns. Think of this as a sort of order of operations, and every mod you select has an effect on the next mod in the order. Here's some of the more important mods. Automap generates the chart in another key count, while also maintaining the general patterns from the original chart. Multiple play doubles a chart as if you were playing the same chart with each hand. Multi-overplay doubles a chart as if you were playing the same chart with double the fingers. Alternate and alternate 2 doubles the input of the chart without introducing more notes, and alternates between the new generated columns. I would avoid using bracket swap and multi-overplay by themselves, as this can artificially increase the chart's difficulty and keeps the dexterity relatively low, so you won't be getting any real practice out of playing charts built like this. I made a video about map conversions a while ago. You can check it out if you want more details, but I'll list a few combinations that I find are useful. For this first one, takes credit for it. Apparently it converts any index chart into a handstream chart. Now I don't know why you'd want to do this considering there's probably hundreds of charts like this, but it seems to work well with pretty much any chart I give it. You can further tweak the auto map numbers to have it do different key counts, but this was clearly designed with 4 key in mind. The full long note mod already does a good job, but you can also combine it with the no long note mod beforehand to get rid of any weird super short or inconsistent long notes throughout the map. This mainly applies to step mania charts where the release time wasn't taken into consideration, but it does make a lot of these sections more playable. Lastly is a standard conversion between the scratch modes. While you can't go 2 scratch to 1 scratch, you can go in the upward direction. So any combination of these mods will let you play 7K 1S charts in the 10K 2S or 14K 2S layouts. Add this mod as well, and as I said, Osu skins then become usable. As you can see, the sequential mods allow for interesting chart generations, so it's one of those things you really have to play with yourself and find combinations that can directly help your practice. The scoring and rating system in Soundsphere is different. Let's start with accuracy, since it's the basis of the scoring and probably the main thing that new players will get confused about. Accuracy is based on the normal score V3 formula, which is a lot of math that I don't really understand. But to put it simple, in cases where players don't miss, then it's the standard deviation of the hits. If there are misses, then that's also accounted for. If you're familiar with Osu scores, then the unstable rate would be this number multiplied by 10. Once we have the accuracy, we can plug it into this formula to give us a score. The score, along with the chart's difficulty, is used to give us our rating. Unlike Eterna, going for really high accuracy doesn't let us obtain a higher rating than the chart's difficulty, but that doesn't mean accuracy isn't important. In fact, if we look at the formula, we can see how linear the relationship is with the score versus rating, and getting 50% of the total score means 50% of the possible rating. So in some cases, you can get a higher rating if you play the chart with easier difficulty parameters if it means that you perform more accurately. Still, I wouldn't push scores past, say, 15% if your main goal is higher rating numbers. If you're still confused about how to interpret these numbers, you can always display what would have been your score in the other game settings. But the main thing to remember here is that lower equals better. Here's a few percentages that would be useful knowing. In Soundsphere, there's different communities, each with their own set of ranked key counts, and they're divided like so. While this is nice and does a good job of giving each mode its own level of importance, you're probably better off just comparing your own progress on a chart-to-chart basis. For one, there's just not a high volume of scores or players, so at most, you'll be passing 7 players, all because you play more charts than them. And the other issue is inflation. Any chart is considered ranked and contributes to your overall ranking, which can lead to situations like this. I'm not exactly sure how the ENPS is calculated, but this assumes that any Vibro player could get rank 1 on all leaderboards with charts built like this. The only thing that seems to prevent your score from being submitted is screwing with the timing settings, which probably messes with how the score calculation happens and can lead to scores appearing better than what they actually are. This is the main detriment to Soundsphere, at least to me. Other games like Eterna and Quaver allow for timing windows which get converted back to the standard setting once the score is submitted. And with Osu, you have the whole overall difficulty settings. Soundsphere just feels inherently mashy to play in, even with the emphasis on standard deviation accuracy. If I spend a week playing Soundsphere and go back to Osu, I feel like a completely worse player in terms of accuracy. So I hope an update happens that allows for this aspect of the game to be customizable. If you're unfamiliar with offset and hit sounds in Osu, I highly recommend viewing this video. It's a brief demonstration of what's going on when you play with or without hit sounds. But for this segment, I'll do an overview of all the timing related stuff in Soundsphere. You can play Osu maps normally with 0 offset. For Stepmania or Eterna charts, you'll need -45 milliseconds or anything within that area. Quaver charts work the same as Osu, requiring 0 offset. You can use hit sounds as the timing is already good in Soundsphere, but I would still recommend auto key hit sounds being enabled or disabling hit sound volume altogether. Plus, it allows BMS charts to be playable without sounding like this. You can remove your skin's hit sound files to play maps closer to the intended hit sounds. Playing charts on rates gives a pitch effect. Changing the setting to bass effects tempo keeps the original song's pitch, but introduces a lot of latency into the music. From my own testing, the latency isn't really noticeable when increasing the rate, but decreasing the rate by a lot makes a chart unplayable. So keep the setting on bass sample unless the higher pitches bother you. Lastly, I want to touch on MIDI support. Now, obviously, you can convert any chart into any key count, but the main benefit from playing on a piano, which is the pitch accurate charting, is lost with any key count conversion. BMSON and PMS file formats are not supported here, so the only way you can play piano-like charts are through MIDI files, which do a decent enough job, assuming the piece is playable for you. There are a few cosmetic issues here. The skin taking up the entire monitor is a little annoying, but there's not much to work with considering how many keys there are. Most people own keyboards that only have 61 or 76 keys, so displaying extra keys that you can't even hit just takes up space and feels unnecessary. It would be cool if Soundsphere included some sort of octave mod so that you could play MIDI charts pitch accurately, but limit the playfield to either 2 or 4 or any number of octaves, like in Keyboard Mania, how the notes just circle back once it leaves the playable range. BMSON or PMS support in general would go a long way for all of this, but I feel like I'm one of the only active 24 key players, so it makes sense if this aspect was neglected. Special thanks to everyone in the Soundsphere server who answered any questions I had. If you're still confused about something or want more information, you can leave a comment below or join the Soundsphere Discord and ask there. And thanks to everyone who supported the channel. Yes, it's its own rhythm game and not just a standalone